What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Walkout Network. It's your man, Ant Walker. This is the immediate reaction to the UFC's first event on the big ESPN channel. Cain Velasquez and Francis Ngannou just finished their main event, however little it was. And for the first time out of the one video that I have posted to this channel, got a special guest, my friend, fellow Sherdog contributor and host of Mixed Combat Radio, Mr. Matt Hunter. How are you doing, Matt? What's going on, brother?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Obviously, this was the first venture on, not really the first venture. We've had like a couple iterations now, but this is technically speaking the first main event on ESPN for obviously a UFC. And man, what a poetic ending, man. Poor Cain Velasquez. Big network debuts. Not his friend, obviously.
Yeah,
not at all.
That seems to be the game plan. If you want to beat Cain Velasquez, make sure the UFC is debuting on a new platform and fight him. And that's it. Like that's the way to do it. And if you do it that way, you're going to get a dramatic stoppage. This is the second time in as many outings that he has debuted an a UFC event on a major platform and has lost in epic fashion. Very, very quick knockout. Francis Ngannou with what did you catch the official time on that knockout?
I think it was like 22 or 26 seconds. It was in the 20s. I don't know exactly what number it was, but it was like 26, 22, 24, somewhere around that range. I'll look for it very fast. But it was quick.
It definitely caught me. 26 seconds?
26, yes.
Yeah, it caught me way off guard. Like I literally just sat down and started trying to get my mic and everything set up. And then all of a sudden it was over. So there was that. Like, I mean, so here's the most interesting thing about that. I mean, of course, we're going to talk about Ngannou's future prospects in the heavyweight division and all of the just all of the things that this opens up for the division with Daniel Cormier still being the heavyweight champion. But let's talk about how that fight ended so fast. I mean, it looks like Cain Velasquez like blew his knee out in the middle of a punch exchange with Francis Ngannou. You talk about the worst timing ever to blow out your knee when Francis Ngannou was standing in front of you trying to knock your head off. That is the worst possible luck I've ever seen.
I saw that's sort of the narrative being put out, but I don't think that's exactly accurate. If you look closely from what I've seen from the angle, and we don't have the best angle of it, unfortunately, but Ngannou landed a right uppercut that dropped Cain Velasquez, in my opinion. And then the subsequent him being dropped, his knee gave out in a weird direction. We've seen that before when the guys go like completely under and the leg gets caught. That's what it looked like it happened to me. Now, Dominic Cruz and the telecast never really specified, hey, Francis Ngannou dropped him with that right uppercut, but that's what it looked like to me. It looked like clearly, Ngannou landed that 1-2, but it really didn't land, let's be honest. Cain Velasquez went for the single leg, and as there was a little bit of separation, a right uppercut landed at the perfect timing, dropped Cain. I think that's when he blew out his knee. So I actually think that this was just this was the Francis Ngannou uppercut knockout death punch that we've seen before. When that punch lands, it does hurt people. I think that's more of what we saw than Cain on a scramble, blowing out his knee and then the fight ending. That's not how I saw it. Maybe I'm wrong. Of course, we're going to have more, highlights come out later, more information comes out later, but that's not how it looked like to me at all.
I mean, that actually sounds like a much better explanation than what we heard on the broadcast, because when Dominic Cruz said that the 1-2 landed, like at first I looked very confused because it was like that's not what I saw. I did not see a 1-2 land. I did see him duck down. I saw an uppercut thrown. I didn't quite tell if it landed or not, but it would make sense that the uppercut lands, kind of stuns Velasquez, and then the reaction of his lower body from that hit does something to throw his balance off and set his knee unstable. So you got to wonder now, like, what's next for Cain Velasquez? Like, we waited since UFC 200? That was about 2.5 years ago for him to return to the octagon. Mm-hmm. I know part of that was some sort of contract disputes, some sort of negotiations with the UFC that were going wrong behind the scenes. We do know that, but a significant portion of that time was spent on injury reserve, which unfortunately a lot of his career has been spent on. So now you got to think, like, okay, what's next for him? Are these injuries now at 36 years old with these long gaps in activity? Have they now finally caught up to Cain? Is he either one going to have to drastically change up the way he trains and the way he fights, or is are we seeing the end of perhaps the greatest heavyweight of all time and simultaneously one of the biggest waste of potential, honestly, and talent of all time as well?
I mean, think about it. He has a 14-3 career right now. I mean, I know that there's obviously a lot of Cain fans, people that came around during the time. I was one of them that came around the time when Cain became something, when Cain beat Brock Lesnar. I was around during that, so I understand it. I understand the reverence to Cain Velasquez, but I think he's going to be a lot more of a what if, in my opinion, legacy wise going forward, because I don't think he can rebound. I don't think at 36 years old, with the amount of injuries he's had, with the Nevada State Athletic Commission being on record not wanting to give him a license. Think about how incredibly that hard it is for Nevada to not give somebody a license. I mean, the only other one that's really worse, in my opinion, is Texas when it comes to just like, if it's about money, they're going to give out a license no matter what. I mean, Dada 3,000 or 5,000, whatever. Obviously, CM Punk. I mean, the list goes on of McGregor versus Mayweather getting a boxing license. Like, if the money is there, they would give somebody a license. Cain represents money. However, they were worried about Cain's health. That's a huge red flag. On top of it, he took one hard shot. He had one intense, not even flurry, just intense scramble, and his body fell apart. He got dropped. His knee crumbled in front of him. Like, I'll be honest, I don't see Cain somehow rebounding and becoming a relevant player in the heavyweight division moving forward. I just don't see it. I think the legacy now is, hey, we had a guy that was on his path towards greatness, but did he ever really achieve that? I think that's a debate we can have maybe down the line, because it is, right now there's the night that he lost, but that is a debate we can have again weeks from now, months from now, whenever that debate's had. But Cain's legacy is now in question in ways I don't think we really thought it could be when he was on the rise, when he was champion.
Yeah, I definitely can't disagree with that, but I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole just yet, because this literally just happened.
Yeah,
and there are a lot of things that we don't know. So of course, doing an immediate post-fight reaction, we're not going to be watching the post-fight press conference. We're not checking our social media, but so much to see what's being said behind the scenes in what was it called, the Talking Stick Arena in Phoenix. So. I'm really cautious about going down that particular rabbit hole, but on the surface, I really agree. I mean, his body has to be just suffering at this point in his career. So, like, I'll put it this way. So Jason Burgos and I, who host the Trenches on SureDog.com, check that out every Thursday. Cheap plug. So Jason and I were discussing, like, Cain being injury prone. We had a great question from someone about that, about the frequency of his injuries. And one correlation I can think of between himself and the color commentator for the night, Dominic Cruz, who's also plagued with these injury woes, are the need for cardio to sustain their fight strategies. Their approach to the game requires you to have this otherworldly gas tank. In order to have an otherworldly gas tank, you have to train in an otherworldly fashion. And the human body can only stand but so much. I think what Cain Velasquez, being is a big guy who walks at like 245 or something like that, to have 245 pounds being moved around to the point where you can sustain this high pace for 25 minutes, on a consistent basis, that is a very, very grueling thing to put your joints through. So maybe we are seeing Cain's style come back to bite him on the ass, because we're not seeing this sort of injuries out of a guy like a Mark Hunt, who fights in a very energy efficient style. Yeah. We're not seeing these sort of things from a Derek Lewis, like one of those low output guys. But they make sure everything they throw has a lot more pop to it. That's kind of what we're not seeing out of those guys. But with Cain, and on the lower scale, a guy like Dominic Cruz, we're seeing these constant injuries and constant questions about whether or not they're actually going to make it. So I'm not too concerned necessarily about Cain getting in there with heavyweights and being able to do business. Like that's not my immediate concern. I kind of trust that if he's in the cage, his body should, despite what happened tonight, his body should hold up for the most part. But I don't trust the training camp getting through it. Does he make another walk to the cage?
You know, God knows what happens with Cain. Because like you said, I mean, it's not just his training MMA. Like he has collegiate years, he has high school years, he has decades of wrestling, and we know how grueling that can be on a person's body. On top of that, he's always been notoriously the hardest trainer in MMA, right? Like, has anyone ever had a bigger like myth around them when it comes to training camps? I don't think so. Maybe DC. Like that might be the only other guy we can really put in comparison to. Like we've always heard they are insane when it comes to a training camp. That their output when it comes to workouts is just otherworldly. Cain has done that, and you know there's a long line of like super athletes that train super hard, that are high explosive, high volume athletes, that their bodies crumble. Like this does happen across sports. So I think this is just again, this is the end of Cain. Like maybe 5 years ago, if he made this adjustment we're talking about in his training methods, could this have been avoided? Potentially, but not everyone's Dominic Cruz. Like I think we got really accustomed to a quote unquote legend being able to bounce back from years and years long layoffs from injuries and just looking like their old form or better and still proving they're the best in the division. Like that doesn't happen in combat sports. Like the people you can really mention that defy ring rust and defy the amount of injuries and years put on the body, it's very few. Cain Velasquez, just apparently, in my opinion, is not one of them. Now, could he go on and beat top 20 heavyweights, top 30 heavyweights? Absolutely. But again, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about Cain coming back and contending. I think that's out of the question.
Yeah, like I could definitely favor him to beat a Stefan Struve or somebody of that ilk, but to see him against, you put him on against a Stipe Miocic, you put him in against a Curtis Blades, you put him in, I think even you put him in against Alistair Overeem at this point. I think you have to question whether or not he can survive that at this point. And then when you talk about Dominic Cruz kind of defying those odds, he's also a much smaller guy. Dominic Cruz fights at 135 pounds. He probably walks around, judging by the times I've seen him or whatever, he probably walks at about 160, 165 at the most. He's not a big guy. That's not a lot of weight to carry around. So it will be easier on those joints to have 160 pounds to work with as opposed to 245 or 250 or whatever Cain is walking at. But yeah, some very interesting things to think about in the future for Cain Velasquez. Now, let's not take away the shine of Francis Ngannou. You think about what type of year he had in 2018 and how things have turned around so rapidly. Now, maybe I'm remembering my calendar wrong, but was the Curtis Blades rematch, was that the end of 2018 or the beginning of 2019?
That was the end of 2018.
Okay, the end of 2018. So in this stretch of a few months, his world has turned around completely. To go from getting essentially embarrassed and admittedly like mentally destroyed by Stipe Miocic in that title fight to now have and also, to then the Derek Lewis fight.
Also, don't forget being continually slammed by his own promotion throughout that entire losing streak. Like it was the post-fight press conference. Dana White came out there and immediately had talking points against Francis Ngannou. And now, end of 2018, obviously beginning 2019, he's back in heavyweight title contention. Like he arguably is the number one title contender right now. All of a sudden, again, I mean the bouncing effect he's had from the lowest point probably of his career to now back at the top is pretty crazy. And within the span of 12 months, he went from losing to Stipe, one of the worst fights we've ever seen against Derek Lewis, losing in that, and now Curtis Blades knockout in 40-something seconds.
In a main event.
Yeah, knockout of Cain Velasquez on ESPN, the first main event on ESPN in 26 seconds. Now, I mean, Junior Dos Santos did that, for God's sake. It's insane what he's had in the face of his promoter hating on him, in the face of probably the fans turning on him as well. I mean, it is absolutely impressive. Shout out to Francis Ngannou.
Yeah, and Francis Ngannou definitely deserves big props for what he's done in recent months. And now let's look at this title picture as far as Francis Ngannou is concerned. I mean, now, of course, Daniel Cormier, being a close friend and training partner of Cain Velasquez, he is not celebrating right now. This is not a moment of celebration anywhere within the AKA crew. However, I mean, if you are Daniel Cormier and you're looking at this in a selfish way, man, you just had another big fight just fall into your lap.
Absolutely. He went from Brock Lesnar looking more and more likely not an option, John Jones saying, I'm not fighting you at heavyweight, and Stipe continuing to call him out when I think most really don't want the meet a rematch, to now having, Francis Ngannou, super fight. That's another, 500,000 pay-per-view buys?
Easily.
Easily, like in the bag, another payday for him. That's another option. And also, I mean, a completely winnable fight. I mean, it is a dangerous fight because it is Francis Ngannou, but I mean, for all the stylistic flaws in Ngannou that we thought Cain could, take advantage of, we know DC will, because DC is still not in the prime of his career, but DC is still definitely at the top of the division. So I want that fight. I'll be honest. I'm going to go on the record right now. Stipe, sit down, please. Go get another fight. John Jones, you're fighting Anthony Smith, fighting someone else next. Brock Lesnar seems more and more likely not an option. Give me DC versus Francis Ngannou. Maybe the July card. Maybe the
International Fight Week.
Yeah, International Fight Week card. I would take that. Honestly, give me that.
I'm not mad at that at all. And also this right here highlights the flaw in Stipe Miocic's approach to getting this rematch with Daniel Cormier. Because now look at this. Stipe and Francis Ngannou fought each other that night. It happened very clearly. We saw Miocic dominate Ngannou, but they took very different paths from there. They both lost their next fights. Of course, Stipe to Cormier and Ngannou to Derek Lewis. But the activity of Francis Ngannou has now resurrected his prospects of getting himself into a title shot again. So he was able to take on Curtis Blades. He was able to smash Cain Velasquez as well. And now we're talking about a 2-fight finish streak over top name guys, as opposed to someone who has been inactive since being knocked out in the first round. Now, when it's time to make these decisions about who's going to challenge for the heavyweight belt next, those wins that Miocic holds as the UFC heavyweight champion, that was a UFC record, it holds a lot less weight than the here and now. The here and now is that Francis Ngannou has knocked out people in quick fashion in 2 consecutive main event appearances. Very hard to argue against him, and that matchup would sell. You've already got a built-in storyline as far as AKA goes as well. Cormier ending his career in the near future and wanting to essentially pass the torch onto the next great heavyweight. I mean, this stuff kind of writes itself. What do you think?
I agree absolutely, and it's interesting, like juxtaposition. Like we had the Stipe Ngannou fight where it was clear that one is better than the other, right? I think if we have that fight 10 times out of 10, Miocic wins the majority of them. I think obviously just from a stylistic perspective, and look, like you said, the divergent paths that those guys went since that fight, and also Cain Velasquez versus Junior Dos Santos. Like it's clear 10 times out of 10, Cain would get the better of Junior Dos Santos. But look at those two guys post their saga, post their trilogy, and how divergent their paths are. JDS is still a relevant top 10 player in the division. Also another guy that is close to a title shot probably. It's fascinating with the heavyweight division about guys who stay around after devastating losses and guys that don't. I mean, Cain Velasquez looked fantastic post JDS. Steve Miocic looked fantastic post Francis Ngannou. But both those guys aren't really relevant right now. One sort of to his own making, and one obviously just to his own health. But give me, like I said, give me DC versus Francis Ngannou. I do believe, obviously, Francis does have a lot of question marks still in his arsenal because Curtis Blades and Cain were supposed to sort of test him in the wrestling department post Stipe Miocic, and obviously those fights ended too quick to really show anything. Hopefully, with the DC fight, we see that he is improved, but I also think it's going to be one of those fights where we can clearly see if he hasn't. And it only being 2 fights since his loss, 3 fights since the Stipe fight, does he really have the improved wrestling and grappling ability to contend with DC? I don't know yet. We just haven't seen it, unfortunately.
You know what? I'm glad you brought that up. So shout out to my other homie in MMA media, Matt Wells, who is joined the YouTube chat, and he says, how about we still don't know what Ngannou can do in the clinch outside of the Stipe fight? Curtis was supposed to test it. Nope. Cain was supposed to test it. Nope.
Absolutely agree, Matt Wells. And also, Matt Wells, go follow him. I think it's like Mr. Wells something on Twitter. Like, go follow him on Twitter. Great guy to follow.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, shout out to Matt Wells and the homie Kendrick on the Slip and Dip podcast. So check those guys out as well. Yeah, man, I really like. We still don't know a lot about Francis Ngannou. That is a very scary thing, because imagine being Daniel Cormier or whichever heavyweight he fights next, and you find yourself thinking, okay, this is the game plan. I'm gonna drag him into these waters. You get him into those waters, and then you realize he's kind of been training on this. He's been training in this realm just a little bit, and yeah, you're kind of screwed at that moment. So I think whoever is fighting Francis Ngannou next, Daniel Cormier included, has a lot to worry about. Yes, there are very clear paths to victory, as Miocic laid out, but man, good luck getting there.
Well, even Miocic took a lot of shots in that first round or so. I mean, it's not without its perils fighting Francis Ngannou. And also, it's one of those things where if you're DC, you kind of want to get him as soon as possible, because he is one of those guys I think that's continuing to improve. He's the sort of athlete, and I think he has the mind for the game that he's going to get better with time. And that's a very dangerous proposition where, 3 years from now, what does Francis look like? That could be a very interesting prospect to say, like, hey, Francis, 3-5 years on the line with a lot of training behind him. That's a devastating machine. Of course, DC doesn't have many fights left, but again, it's one of those things. Get him right now. Get him while he's still a little bit green. And also, you are as young as you're going to be. If you go in and fight John Jones or Stipe in a rematch or whoever it may be, then go in a Francis fight, you're getting more wear and tear on your body. And going against Francis Ngannou, you don't want that. Look what happened to Cain. And also with a guy like Francis, sort of switching back to the aspect of him not really being tested yet, it's one of those aspects of the game right now where if he was to sort of take a back step in ranking and fight someone that would give him more of a look in the grappling department, it does so little for him. I think it even does worse for him. Like, it's a dangerous proposition from a promoting aspect. Like, imagine putting him in there with like a Alexei Oleinik or somebody like that that's really going to test him on the ground. I think the UFC wouldn't want to do that. I think it just makes bad promotional sense at this point. I think, again, the fire is hot right now for Francis Strike, and I think we get another heavyweight big super fight in a sense that gets pushed, and Dana White goes on the press tour again saying about Francis Ngannou is the most devastating hitter, more devastating than Mike Tyson, and we all hear the same stories again. And I can't wait for it.
Yeah, like there's absolutely no need for Francis Ngannou to want to test these skills out unnecessarily. If it is not in a big fight, there is no reason to invite stylistic challenges. Keep those stylistic challenges for the training room. Lock yourself in a wrestling room. Lock yourself in the same wrestling room that MVP needs to be in. And just train and train and train on your wrestling, and let it be a surprise to whoever faces you next. That is probably the course of action for Francis Ngannou. And by the way, yes, we can talk Bellator as well, since there was no post-fight available for that.
Do we have to talk about it, though? We don't
have to. We don't have to, but I'm just leaving the option out there because, oh man, Scott Coker did not have the best weekend, huh?
Very quickly, we're going to switch back to it later in the show, obviously, but imagine you're going into a fight thinking like, oh, I might see the next best thing in the welterweight division, and go, oh wait, none of these guys are top 30 welterweights. Cool. And it's a main event. that I'm watching on a Saturday night, and I've wasted 8 hours in this entire event watching Roy Nelson and Mirko Krokop fight and Czech Congo with another Czech Congo style fight. Oh, shout out to Bellator, man. They are the best grifters in the sport. Shout out to them.
Keep on trucking, baby. Keep on trucking. All right. So before we move on, comment from Cade187. He says, I really don't see DC fighting Ngannou if this is his last fight. It's either going to be Brock or Stipe. Now, Brock is definitely the number one fight. That's the fight you want. That's the big fight. That's the money fight. That's probably going to be the easiest fight out of those three options.
From a competitive standpoint, right? Yes.
Yeah, from a competitive standpoint, yes. I mean, definitely be the easiest to make money at. DC, all he has to do is show up, and Brock's presence will be a million pay-per-view buys at least.
It might be the hardest fight to make, though, which is why I think that it's continuing to look like it's unlikely outcome and possibility. Because
once the bout agreement is signed, all the work is really done for that fight. The bout agreement being signed is the key, and that's that. But you face other challenges with Stipe. Granted, who knows? Granted, we saw what happened when they first fought, but who knows if that were to happen again? We do know this, though. It'll be very difficult for him to improve upon his performance against Stipe. So why take that fight if you don't have to? And the first one was not a blockbuster sellout. So why take the stylistic risk? Why potentially, throw kind of some shade around your original win against Miocic unnecessarily and throw a doubt over your legacy as a heavyweight champion for a smaller payday? Doesn't make any sense. So Ngannou would be the second option to Brock Lesnar, if you ask me. But what do I know? I'm just a guy wearing a Black Panther t-shirt because it is actually the anniversary of Black Panther coming out. So, that's what's up.
Now, do you think the Francis fight is above a John Jones trilogy fight for DC? Like you put John Jones as the third option in your mind, not the second option?
No. John Jones fight would be a bigger seller than the Francis Ngannou fight. I just don't want him to do that at 205. That fight needs to happen at heavyweight. That's the only way it makes sense to anybody. That's the best thing, even for his legacy. That's the best thing to do. Have the fight at heavyweight. And even he stands a better chance of winning that as well. I mean, that's another rabbit hole that I'm sure we're going to go down in the near future. All right, so let's see here. Now let's go to the co-main event. Paul Felder defeats James Vick by unanimous decision. I had Felder winning this fight. It kind of went the way I thought it would. Mm-hmm. I thought Felder would be the more technical guy, would be the guy to control the range better, despite the fact Vick being 6'3" and having like this monstrous range for lightweight. Felder just has the improved fight IQ. He's just a smarter guy in the cage. I think his time as an analyst has helped that even more so. Agreed. He's been able to like maximize his limitations as an athlete and put it on guys when otherwise he wouldn't be able to. And I think this fight was a perfect example of that.
And also, I mean, the best part about this fight is that we saw aspects of both guys' game plan at moments that was efficient, that was working. Like we saw at times James Vick keep Paul Felder at range, work the jab, work the leg kicks, and really be efficient. And then we saw, obviously, what we know of James Vick, that he has no inside game. And Paul Felder, once he got on the inside, was able to unleash the more efficient, heavier shots. On top of that, like you said, sort of switching back to your idea of Paul Felder post being the analyst has now improved. I absolutely agree. I think his timing has improved with age. His ability to time those spinning back fists, spinning elbows was flawless. I mean, every single one was landing. It was perfectly timed. I think it was either in the third or late in the second round when Felder landed that really huge spinning back elbow. I was shocked James Vick did not go down. Absolutely shocked. And also, like, again, seeing a fighter grow into a veteran, that's always cool to see. Like, Paul Felder is now a veteran in the game, and he fights like that. Like, Don Cerrone is another perfect example. A guy that has grown into fighting like a veteran, being smart, being savvy, working their timing, working angles more so than raw strength, more so than speed, more so than athleticism. I think that's always better for aging fighters. And James Vick, he still has not improved his technical flaws. I mean, that chin is still straight up in the air. He's still predominantly a fighter that wants to fight out range for obvious reasons. He's 6'3", 6'4", but he has never been able to really grow a inside striking arsenal. Whether it's a Muay Thai clinch, whether it's inside boxing, he has never really been able to do that. He doesn't really even have good hooks, uppercuts. Like, he doesn't really have like good strikes in his toolbox for the inside. He's just completely out of his depth there. It would have been interesting to see this fight go to the ground more, because I think Felder would have had a stronger advantage, because this fight was close in my opinion. But Felder won it. I mean, Felder was the more efficient fighter. He landed the more significant shots throughout the fight, and again showed that he's the veteran thinker in there when it comes to the fight game.
Yeah, and the leg kicks were outstanding. Felder was able to greatly affect Vick's mobility the entire time, and it was kind of like he had no answer for those leg kicks. You saw him check a couple, but he really ate most of them, and he just kind of Vick seems to have this habit of just staying perfectly outside of his particular range. Like, he stays right in that midpoint where you're throwing too long of a hook, but you're throwing too short of a jab, and you can't quite elbow as much. But it's just that sweet spot for his opponent to tag his chin, and he seemed to consistently find himself in that position for this entire fight, which was pretty interesting to witness. Another thing too, man, you just got to wonder, what is this weight cut doing to him at this point? He honestly, I mean, he never looks like necessarily like a muscle bound guy or anything, but, and I don't know, maybe it was just my mind playing tricks on me with the new bald cut he has and whatnot. But did he look like his face looked like extra hungry or extra emaciated, or?
I think he always kind of looks like that. This weight, I think the weight cut's hard for him for obvious reasons. The guy's massive.
It was the hair then that was fooling me.
Yeah, I think it was the hair more so.
That man needs a beard, like right now. He needs a beard.
He might be one of those guys that can't grow one, in my opinion.
And that's rough.
There was no shade. It just doesn't seem like he grows a beard.
I mean, but that's rough though. If you have the baldy like that and you can't grow the beard, like, because it wasn't bald by choice. It was bald because the hairline was not cooperating anymore. So damn, that's rough, man.
I didn't know you were analyzing James Vick's hairline so much.
I'm very sensitive to hairline issues because I've had my own in the past. So
wait, in the past?
Wow. Hey, hit the gunshots for that one, man. Hit the gunshots. What are gunshots?
Out, man.
Smoke.
Oh man, that's good times. Look, I think James Vick is one of those guys that just hasn't improved. Also, like, it's not. I don't think the weight cut is as much of a factor with like this loss, for example. Like, maybe it is for other ones, like the Justin Gaethje fight or the Beneil Dariush fight, for example. But it's a technical like issue with his game. Like you mentioned, like, he has no concept of his own range. He really doesn't. He's like Stefan Struve. He's another tall guy that does not fight like a tall guy. He doesn't have an in and out game. Maybe that's because he's not really the best athlete. He's not really the fastest guy. Maybe it was the leg kicks from Paul Felder, but he's never been that. He's never been a guy that can get in and out of range of his range and be comfortable at it and work the jabs, work the teep kicks, and work a like real point kickboxing game. He's never been able to really do that, even though he's wanted to. We can tell that that's his attempt, but I don't think he has the technical training for it, honestly, or he just doesn't have the natural ability to do it. I think James Vick needs to go back to the drawing board because he has the frame, he has the talent. He just doesn't have the technical skills to put it all together. Especially if he's losing a guy like Paul Felder. Like, this was a guy that if James Vick had the technical skill, he would have outpointed, and he didn't. And unfortunately, I think James Vick should move up in weight and potentially, obviously, change camps. I'm not the biggest fan of Lloyd Irvin, but beside that, I think that he has not improved. And a guy that young, that talented, not improving is a massive red flag for a prospect now contender. So there needs to be some changes to the Vick camp. And Paul Felder, keep being the veteran, savvy guy, and you're going to get big fights. You're going to lose them, but you're going to get big fights here and there. And I mean, Paul Felder is one of the nice guys in the sport, so I'll continue watching it. And plus, it was a fun fight.
Yeah, a good point about James Vick's camp. I mean, all the issues aside of the stigma around Lloyd Irving and fighters associated with him, you look at the history of a lot of Lloyd Irving's fighters, and there's been a stagnation.
Yes,
in a lot of them, and Mike Easton being probably the best example of that, a guy who stayed his entire career with Lloyd Irving, and you saw him able to do a lot of really good things, but once he got to a certain sticking point, that was it, and there was no sign of improvement, and he stayed the same guy until he was bounced out the UFC. So good point about that. Let's hope James Vick can get things on track. But shout out to Paul Felder for putting on a fight. And please, I mean, I think this will be another time that we should trash the crowd in Phoenix.
Yes.
That was one of the worst crowds ever. They sucked like there's no tomorrow. Like, I mean, come on now. They were booing every damn thing that wasn't originating from Arizona or wasn't some sort of massive just CTE fest of a brawl.
You know, they didn't even really apply Vicente Luque versus Brian Barbarina. Like, they didn't really get hyped for any fight. Like, honestly, these people.
I mean, maybe that's your job, but where I come from, people like that get slapped.
Yeah, they need to get slapped, okay? Because that was some real disrespect there. Like, again, one of the worst crowds I've seen for a fight event in some time. Like, I've seen unenthusiastic crowds. That crowd was hostile the whole time. It was weird.
For nothing. Hostile for nothing.
Yeah, I watched this entire card from the first fight on, and every fight there was booing.
It's every single Paul Felder was throwing spinning back elbows, and you're booing. How stupid do you have to be to boo someone doing a spinning back elbow?
Hey,
how dumb? That was a crowd of dummies.
I'll say this. You don't have to mention it. I'll say it. This obviously is Phoenix, one of the highest centers of Trumpism. So, just saying, man.
Hey, somebody tweeted that to me. Somebody tweeted that to me, and there might be a correlation. I don't know. I don't know.
It might be indirect correlation or a direct one. I don't know. I don't care. But it was a crowd of stupid people that were hostile from the get-go for no reason. It was odd, and this was a fun card. Honestly, I thought all the fights were competitive, were fun. There might not have been a clear fight of the year contender on the card, but a lot of these fights were fun, in my opinion. Cindy Cavallo, Courtney Casey was fun, in my opinion.
You enjoyed that fight?
Yeah, I thought it was fun. I thought that was maybe the worst fight on the card. That was still a fun fight, in my opinion.
Well, see, that fight let me know how trash the crowd in Phoenix was, because while they were booing so many really good fights and really good moments, like the Andre Feely and Jury fight was a very good fight. They were booing that, and somehow or another they found it in them to cheer for Casey versus Calvillo. I thought that definitely wasn't the worst fight I've ever seen, but they clearly were cheering for Casey because she's the Arizona native. Clearly, because quite frankly, I think she showed horrible fight strategy during that. I don't think there's any way you can interpret that as a win for her.
Has Courtney Casey ever showed brilliant fight IQ?
No, absolutely no. But she's found herself the recipient of some gift decisions there. But what? Jay just reminded me in a Slack chat that they weren't cheering for the Casey Calvillo fight. They were actually doing the wave. So maybe there's hope yet for this Phoenix crowd.
No, there isn't. Stop. Nope. No hope.
Hey,
Jay, come on. This crowd deserves some ribbon, because that was that made the event almost unenjoyable. I wanted to just turn the sound off because it was just booming all the time. Andrea Lee was phenomenal in her fight, in my opinion. I thought she looked fantastic. I thought her kickboxing was on point, and they were booing her.
It's ridiculous.
It made no sense, man.
Ridiculous. What that crowd. The UFC doesn't ever need to go into Phoenix ever again. I'm sorry for all you real fight fans in Phoenix. I'm sorry for you. This is not directed at you, but be mad at the dumbass that was sitting next to you booing. Be mad at all the dumbasses that were wooing and waving and doing everything but enjoying a good night of mixed martial arts. That dummy that was sitting next to you that you didn't stop is the reason why the UFC never needs to be in your city ever again.
Or like I understand why they do this for like the ambiance, but you really don't need it. They had like Megan Olivia like on every single angle with like a crowd behind her doing like, you know, in between fight stuff.
And shout out to the man picking his nose.
Thank you. I'm about to say that. I'm like, dude. I'm like, yo, you're at least 45 years old. I'm being generous here. And you're doing this stupid shit. Like, you must be on, what, 3 or 4 beers, which, like, you haven't had because your wife doesn't let you drink beer, dude. Like, come on. Like, grow up. Like, a bunch of 13-year-olds at an event. And also, Phoenix, it's a hot city. It's like 102 degrees year-round. Don't go there. Like, they can go other places that are hot and more fun. Just saying.
Yeah, I mean, like, for real, like, we're doing it.
Vegas, like, not that far away. Just go there.
Yeah. And to the man picking his nose, I mean, you probably were drinking light beer. You were probably drinking like Bud Light. Like, you have no right to get drunk off of Bud Light. Okay, knock it off.
I'll put it this way. His idea of a good beer is Bud Light Platinum.
Oh, Bud Light Platinum. Oh, yeah, got to go high style on them. Like, get yourself a real beer, man. I'm drinking an oatmeal stout, right? This is man beer. Don't try to, man, get that light beer out of here. Fuck out of here with that shit. Yeah, man. But anyway, all right, so let's get back to it before we completely lose our minds. I'm going to pull up the official results. We'll read it down, and then we'll kind of just go about what we normally do. Oh, Jay agrees. He says burn it all down when talking about the crowd.
Yeah.
So we've been asked a couple times about our fight of the night, and of course, you know what it is. But let's go down these results first. So after the Cavillo decision over Courtney Casey, Kron Gracie gets a first-round submission win over Alex Caceres. Vicente Luque gets a very late stoppage against Brian Barbarina. That's 4 minutes and 54 seconds into the final round. Andre Feely with a unanimous decision over Miles Jury. Aljamain Sterling over Jimmy Rivera with a unanimous decision. Manny Bermudez, who missed weight by 4 pounds, I believe it was, he got a submission win over Benito Lopez. Some debate over whether or not that was a guillotine choke or a Darce, whatever. Still was a choke finish in the first round. Andrea Lee dominates in a decision win against Ashlee Evans-Smith. Nick Lentz, a very hard-fought, smart decision win over Scott Holtzman. Luke Sanders destroys Henning Burrell with punches in the second round, and yeah, that was sad.
Yo, R.I.P. Henning Burrell, man.
And Emily Whitmire defeats Alexandra Albu by a very quick rear naked choke in the first round. So those are your results. Now let's go over some of the highlights from the card. So let's just go ahead and just get this out the way. Vicente Luque versus Brian Barbarina is front runner for fight of the year so far.
Well, I mean, it is February.
That's why I say so far.
Okay.
That's why so far. Like, that's the front runner for fight of the year. Like, anybody who's winning fight of the year, you've got quite some big shoes to fill.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained?
I was entertained. I'll put it this way. I thought Barbarina was going to win this fight. I thought he was on the way to winning this fight, to be honest. I wasn't scoring it, so I don't know exactly what the scorecards were. Maybe you might know what the Sherdog
I was one of the scores for Sherdog. I had it 29-28 for Barbarina. I had that win to the decision.
Yeah, and Vicente Luque is sort of like a James Vick, another guy, like a guy that is really offensively gifted, but defensively completely flawed. Very basic. It leaves obviously Luque up to the opportunity for him to get losses. On his way to a Barbarina loss, he's had already quite a few losses in his career. So I think there is a clear ceiling on Vicente Luque, but obviously he's a freak athlete, insane power. I think a real good sense of when to throw the right shots at the right timing to really get the finish and capitalize on his moment. But I don't know really where to go from here with either one, because I was really impressed with Barbarina's activity. I thought his volume, his accuracy was highly impressive, and then obviously Luque just out of nowhere knocked him out. So I'm still more of a in shock mode with this fight. Great back and forth affair, and obviously great finish and comeback finish on top of that.
I mean, that's I'm just amazed that the knockout didn't happen sooner. Both of these guys probably took years off of each other's lives in this fight. Like, they beat each other into oblivion, and it was very, very, very entertaining. I think also too, I really like Barbarina's approach to his offense. It wasn't necessarily trying to knock you out with every shot. He threw a whole lot of volume, but he mixed the power shots in at almost random points. I think it kept Luque kind of defensive and really unsure of what to do. And correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm remembering this incorrectly, but the way it plays out in my mind, I'm thinking more so that Barbarina would kind of get these combinations going. And once Luque found himself feeling like he was in trouble, it forced him to throw something hard back, and it forced him to stay in the fight. I think strangely enough, had Barbarina almost dialed it down just a little bit, maybe he would have overwhelmed him with volume eventually by not, necessarily forcing the hard shots that eventually caught up to him out of Luque.
I think Barbarina could have had a stick and move game plan with the jab and won. Clearly, like, I thought Luque had no concept of head movement, like no concept of getting off the center line, really. Wasn't pairing shots, wasn't blocking shots. Just been really, like, not doing really basic defensive stuff when it comes to striking. So like you said, if Barbarina wanted to dial it back a little bit and not engage into a firefight, he could have. I think he could have outpointed him really to a decision win. Hopefully, if you're Barbarina, you go back to some tape and you look at this and say, hey, if I dialed it back a little bit when it comes to volume, stick and moved a little bit more, use my feet a little bit more than my hands, I could have outboxed this guy easily. Because Vicente Luque had the high guard, he would get stuck, and he was turning too slow. Like, Barbarina was styling on him on times. But the difference was Barbarina, when he was done with his combinations, didn't disengage and separate. He stayed close to him. He stayed within range to where Luque could fire back on him. And that was the sort of the flaw to the game plan of Barbarina, is that he never really had the stick and move concept to the game plan down. He had everything else dialed in, but that stick and move aspect, he just didn't either understand, got sucked away from, or just did not plan for at all.
I think it's going to be very interesting to see what Luque does now in the welterweight division. This extends his win streak to 4, and getting a win over Barbarina, a guy who has played spoiler more than a couple times in his career, it's a big deal. It's a very big deal. It definitely pushes him over the edge as far as like his prospects in the division, like where you want to place him in the rankings and the sort of matchups that he should get from here on out. So I really want to see if his future opponents kind of notice this sort of thing, and whether or not a stick and move plan, just kind of boxing out a decision, is going to be what undoes him, which snaps this win streak. But if Luque can kind of close that hole, sky's the limit for this guy at welterweight. And despite the fact that welterweight is very talented at the top, I think there is enough of an opening for him to get through and kind of force his way in that top 10 and maybe make some noise throughout the rest of the year, if not in early 2020.
I'm not ready for a top 10 fight for Luque, but what I am ready for, and just hear me out, this is a matchup I think that you're going to love. Curtis Millender versus Vicente Luque. I think that would be a good fight to sort of read out the prospect of those two, and the winner of that fight get a top 10 opponent.
I'm not mad at that. Yeah, I'm not mad at that at all.
Vicente against anyone in the top 10, he gets outfought. Like, he just doesn't have the technical depth to his game to, I think, really contend right now with that top 10. I just don't see it.
I was thinking maybe, although he's not ranked in the top 10, but a guy like Michael Chiesa will be a good name that could provide some sort of interesting style challenge. I think that would be something else. And it's also of note that all of his wins have been by stoppage in the UFC. So that says a lot. And his losses have been by decision, and that's it. So good job on Vicente Luque and Brian Barbarina. Outstanding performance by both guys. I do love that they were, and I know typically we don't like to see the post-fight interview for the guy who just lost by knockout, but this was one of the times where it felt appropriate. Barbarina is in his hometown, and the fight was so close. He was 6 seconds away from winning a decision on my scorecard. But 6 seconds away from the final bell, period. And to get finished like that in such an exciting fight in front of his hometown, and it was more so a product of him being tired than being, you know, concussed and knocked out. I think that was a good time to do that, and that was a good moment for him, even if it was a loss for Anik to give him that in-cage interview.
Agreed. And plus, I mean, I don't think either guy's gonna be a champion at any point. Like, let's just be honest about both guys' ceilings here. So if they're going to be top 20 guys fighting it out and putting on really fun fights, you're going to have great careers and really fun careers. And in this division, it's one, maybe the second or third best division in the sport. So you're going to find, and you're going to get big fights here and there. You're going to get good names on the come up here and there. Again, being that sort of top 20 gatekeeper, a lot of money in it still in the UFC. So I think either guy, whatever the futures hold, while it's not championship future, it's still going to be a profitable, fun fight future. So I'm excited for both guys next.
All right. So let's see. Let's move on to all right. We can briefly touch on Andre Fili versus Miles Jury. Mainly,
why are you hating on Kron Gracie? You don't want to talk about Kron? I mean,
oh yeah, I had it down on my notes. Chicken scratch. All right, cool. We'll talk about Kron Gracie. I mean, what's there to talk about? Gracie's going to Gracie.
I mean, I'll be honest. I picked Alex Caceres to beat him. I thought this was a fight off a layoff, B, a fight against somebody that is far more experienced than you, and somebody that is a journeyman, yes, but a UFC level journeyman. I think that means a little bit something more than your average regional MMA journeyman. I think Kron Gracie, if he has any sort of dedication to the sport, he has star material written on him, in my opinion. I think he's a good-looking dude. I think he's charismatic. Obviously, that Gracie name still holds so much cachet in this industry. I'm excited for him. Like, I wasn't really excited for Kron Gracie before this fight. And then as the walkout's happening, I was like, you know what? It's a Gracie. Like, I am pumped for this. And he won. And he won in impressive fashion. I think if the UFC is smart with their matchmaking, they have somebody here. They really do. So I can't wait to see what Kron Gracie's next couple moves are. Again, it's good to have a Gracie back in the sport in 2019. Who would have thought that would happen? But it looks like it is happening.
Yeah. And let's also make note of this too. Jay wanted everyone to know that, they didn't televise Kron Gracie's walkout. A lot has been made about his walkouts. Apparently, he walks out to just an air raid siren just blaring with no music, nothing.
Wait, serious?
Yeah, seriously, just like an air raid siren just going off. Just madness, terror, and chaos accompany him to the cage.
I love that. And also, let's be honest, you have the Diaz brother connection. I mean, that rub for the hardcore cult-like fan base that is MMA fans, that helps. You put Gracie in some pictures with some weed, get him some sort of endorsement with like Weed Maps or something. You have a internet star on the making. Trust me. Maybe like Sean O'Malley style. Like there's a fan base for that. And Kron Gracie has the name value more than any other prospect in the sport. Let's be honest. So I'm happy. I'm hyped. I feel like to be a fan again when I was like 5 years old. Finding the old Gracie tapes and shit like that. Like this is fun to me. So it's sort of a nostalgic fight in my mind, the Kron Gracie Alex Caceres fight, and it was nice. It was a nice addition to the card. I was not thinking it was going to be as good as it was, in not in terms of fight excitement, but just what it felt like to me, like the moment of history it could be. But it felt like a big moment.
Yeah, the nostalgia was definitely running deeper than just the Gracie name and just the approach to the fight. Also, the post fight speech. Like to start it off by saying "Whoop, there it is." Like if that's not a throwback,
yeah.
Are you even old enough to remember that song?
I mean, when it came out, no, it came out before I was born. But I remember being like 4 years old watching D2 Mighty Ducks, And when they played street hockey, that song came on. So, I mean, everyone knows that song. Like, that is a song that is synonymous with like 90s, early 2000s movies. So I love that song.
I mean, that's one of those songs that like it has a special place in our hearts. But I mean, it's also like the Macarena. Like, we acknowledge it existed, but we don't need it anymore.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's disrespectful.
It's the hood Macarena. That's what Whoop There It is. I said it. What? Don't at me. What?
I don't know if that's apt, but okay. I'll let you slide on this one. You know, you're a little more ethnic than me, so I'll let you be the voice of reason, or the voice of the expert here on the matter. But I mean, that seems disrespectful.
I am the grumpy old man out of us too, so I'll go ahead and wear that hat.
What about Jump Around? Is that more like, which one's more of the Macarena in your mind?
Oh, definitely Whoop There It Is.
Okay.
Definitely
I'll agree with you on that part. I was thinking
Jump Around is still kind of dope though. That still has its place. All right, Whoop There It Is just doesn't belong anywhere. It just doesn't.
Every once in a while, you play like Jump Around in the car, like it still slaps. Like it still does.
Like, you can't play it in the car, but if you're at a bar and the joint come on, you nod your head a little bit. You know what I'm saying? If it's at an event, at a basketball game or something, yeah, it gets hype.
And you gotta be like your goofy ass friend, like not your serious friend. It has to be your goofy ass friend that like likes to reminisce and be a dumbass. Like that's situation you need.
Like I'll tell you this. Cynthia Calvillo walked out to Jump Around tonight, actually, but
she did.
Yeah, thanks Jay for that. So Jay was keeping track of walkout music along with the homie Mike Sloan.
But it is and Jump Around in the same card.
Like, man, with Gracie, this was a throwback card right here. But
it was worth dealing with the Phoenix crowd just for those two walkouts being in the same event.
I'll just put this out there, and if you one of those people, yes, I'm talking to you. If you are riding around and you are listening to Jump Around in your car, I'm judging you.
Yo, every 3 years, man, it's worth it.
I am judging you.
No,
you will be forever judged playing Jump Around while you're riding around.
Hey, it comes on the shuffle. It's worth it, man.
If Jump Around is on your playlist, is not your workout list, I'm judging you.
You don't have like a super playlist with like every song that you've ever liked. You don't have one of those playlists that's like weeks and weeks long in terms of like length.
I have my hip hop shit playlist. There's just all these rap songs that I love from all different eras and whatnot. Jump Around is not on it.
Damn. Not even for like the nostalgic laugh. Not even for like the 30 seconds. Oh, I want to listen to the song for 30 seconds, laugh, and then hit skip.
No, just in case I'm in a position where I can't press a skip button.
Is Pump It Up in there?
No,
okay.
Pump It Up's not on.
Man, you just don't have fun then.
Actually, Pump It Up is on there. Pump It Up is on there. It's definitely on my gym playlist. All right, we are going way off the rails. All right, we're going to dial it back. We're going to dial it back just a bit. So, all right, so I definitely wanted to talk about this Aljamain Sterling win over Jimmy Rivera. So I've been saying this forever. I've been saying this forever. If Aljamain Sterling closes the boxing hole in his game, this guy is a world beater. This guy would be unstoppable at 135 pounds. Aljamain Sterling is one of the most athletic guys in the division. He has one of the best wrestling bases out of any of the guys in the division. And he is an exceptional kicker. And to be an exceptional kicker is a different type of skill. It's a different sort of athleticism required in that because for those of you who have not trained before, if your offense is almost exclusively kicks, the energy output is higher. It's harder to place those strikes. It's a lot harder to do things. And Aljamain Sterling was able to defeat Jimmy Rivera barely using his hands. That says a lot about what he's capable of.
Well, I mean, I think it was in the second round, right, where he has that huge flurry. He had Jimmy stuck in the cage and was just unloading on him, right? That was a moment where I was like, yes, this is the Aljo I've always wanted to see. Because like you said, like that's always been the hole in his game. It was his boxing technique. And similar to other guys we talk about, like James Vick on this card, Francis Ngannou, in a sense, on this card. Guys that are insane, talented individuals, both athletically both in terms of physique, like all of them are tall guys, rangy guys, much higher than the average in the division. Aljamain Sterling might be the biggest, tallest guy at 135 pounds. So it's never been an issue about talent with Aljo. It's always been an issue about technique. And he's steadily been improving since the Brian Caraway loss, in my opinion. But this was a real jump from what I've seen. So I'm just ecstatic to see that, because I've always been an Aljamain Sterling fan. I said on my show earlier this week, like, I have an affinity for Aljo because he has a place in MMA history that I don't think really gets the due respect. He was one of the main guys that started the free agency era, so to speak. That was a couple years ago. Like, we don't get, in my opinion, a Phil Davis, Ryan Bader move to Bellator unless Aljo tested the free agency waters. And he did that as a no-name prospect that was like a top 15 guy. That took a lot of guts. And I don't think he really ever got his props because he lost to Caraway right after that. But look at his career since then. Yeah, he's had a couple of bumps on the road since then as well, but he has improved with each fight. I think he's shored up any holes in his game. And I can't wait to see him fight maybe the winner down the line of a Moraes-TJ Dillashaw fight. Henry Cejudo obviously might be in the equation somewhere. But whatever it is, Aljo is top 5 in the division. I'm glad to see that. And plus, it's good to see a guy that I think has had a positive influence on the entire sport sort of get, his just due in a way. And I think that's sort of finally happening in a weird way. Shout out to Aljamain Sterling. Fantastic fighter. Improved drastically from fight to fight. And, man, he has some hands now. I like that. Aljamain Sterling with hands is dangerous. Still not complete. Still has holes in his boxing, obviously, but he is vastly improved. Going to see what's next for the guy.
Yeah, that definitely adds a lot of flavor to the 135-pound division, a division that really needs, some more injections of life after what happened with TJ Dillashaw. What do you say?
It needs more character in a way. Like, Aljamain Sterling's a fun guy. He's entertaining outside the cage in an interview.
Yeah, he's one of the nicest guys in the sport, for sure.
And no disrespect to Marlon Moraes, but he's not really the best interview, not really the most entertaining guy when it comes to being on the mic. TJ Dillashaw, I think he's always seemed like a very bro fighter, right? Like, he's never really connected with the fans in any way. Cody Garbrandt, a little bit of that bro mentality as well, but he's also, I think, sort of a victim of those 2 losses to TJ Dillashaw. Like, we just don't talk about Cody Garbrandt anymore. Dominic Cruz is on the bender again. With injuries. So now we have another character in the division that's relevant, that's a contender, that is arguably the most entertaining guy still in that division. So, yeah, like you said, it does breathe life into 135 that I don't think we realized wasn't there. Like a year ago or 6 months ago, if you say like 135 was like needing someone, I think you would be laughed at. Like, we would be thinking, oh, TJ is at the top. Like, he's going to fight Henry Cejudo. Marlon Moraes, Rafael Sunsao down the line. Like, that's going to be a clear number 1 contender. Like, there's no issue at 135. But I think there was. Sort of an issue with a life or lack thereof at 135. Now we have that. So shout out to Aljamain Sterling. Again, always.
Definitely. So quick notes from the post-fight presser. Jay is informing us that Luque, Vicente, and Brian Barbarina did indeed win fight of the night. The performance of the night bonuses go to Kron, Gracie, and Luke Sanders, who we'll get to in a moment. Another press conference note from Matt Wells. He informed us that Cain is saying he wasn't punched at the post-fight presser. He says he's standing by the knee going out as the reason for the end of the fight, despite slow-motion replays showing his head popping back.
Emotional. Why you emotional?
It's okay, Cain, man. It's okay, man. Quickly, another note that was on Sports Center, not the press conference. Cormier obviously made an appearance on Sports Center with Ariel Helwani and Chael Sonnen. And according to Ariel Helwani's Twitter account, Cormier said exactly, in quote, when asked about fighting Francis Ngannou, "I would not fight Francis. I would beat him." So it looks like I think me and you can get our wish. And DC Francis Ngannou looks likely.
Ka-ching. That's a money fight right there. And one of the rare times where a money fight is actually the right thing to do for a division. So I ain't mad at it at all. Everybody secure your bag, please. Like, I'm all for that. All right, so let's see. What other standout ones? So I definitely wanted to touch on the Ashlee Evans-Smith and Andrea Lee fight very briefly. I mean, it was a fun fight simply because Ashlee Evans-Smith refused to fight in a way that would remotely give her a chance of winning.
Yep.
You know, when in the first 45 seconds, it was very clear, although we knew this already, it was very clear that she had no business standing there kickboxing with Andrea Lee, yet she elected to do this for literally the majority of the fight.
You know, I think obviously a part of it maybe is due to coaching and just game planning, but I think another part of it is that Ashlee Evans-Smith landed a fantastic front kick to the face of Andrea Lee really early in the fight. Like, she landed a hard combo that was flush in the first 20 seconds, and Andrea Lee had to sort of adapt to that really quickly. I think Ashlee Evans-Smith just sort of got sucked into that fight because she got really successful really early, landed a hard shot, and I think she didn't realize, hey, this is actually my game plan. Like, I shouldn't be striking with Andrea Lee, who just outpointed her at the end of the day. Like, was in and out at range, picking angles off the center line. Her timing and accuracy was on point. For somebody that has been dealing with obviously a lot of outside the cage issues with the domestic violence situation, with her still on the run ex-boyfriend, ex-husband, who still has not been found by the police. You know, I think this was the performance she needed, where it just showed us, she's still I think one of the flyweights we talk about as being a potential next contender in the next couple of years. And she showed that. I mean, her striking ability reminded me of Angela Hill in terms of style, but far more efficient, far more composed with herself, and more power on top of that. I really enjoyed the technical back and forth between these two.
Yeah, Andrea Lee definitely put on a showcase. Like, that was a great showcase for her. And please explain to me now. I saw this through, you know, a couple guys from Sherdog were informing me of this. So I don't know. I didn't hear this audio for myself, but apparently her corner, Ashlee Evans-Smith corner, was telling her going into the third round that they thought the fight was tied and not giving her any sense of urgency into the last round. If that is the case, that is some of the worst cornering that I could ever think of. Like, that was terrible. Her corner failed her in this fight. Not only
multiple parts too, because A, the fight wasn't tied, and B, even if it was, you still need urgency in that third round.
Yeah, exactly. If it's tied, you need the urgency. So there's really no excuse for this. In addition to a very puzzling strategy on her part that clearly was not working. Yet the only times that there was the effort to change it, it's like she's shooting from the other side of the cage. You know, it's like you're not going to land a takedown on a mixed martial artist who's even remotely competent from that range. So I'm sorry, like I just can't get behind what Ashlee Evans-Smith corner was doing for her in this fight. So there's that.
God knows. I mean, if they were again, I didn't hear that, but if they did say that, God, what? Yeah. And we've seen some pretty bad cornering in MMA history. Like, I think on the whole, cornering in MMA isn't that great, to be honest. But that's one of the worst. When to say, oh, it's tied, and then to have no sense of urgency. Like, that is so counterintuitive to how to win a fight. Like, those coaches should just be yelled at from somebody, honestly.
Yeah, if your corner is giving you advice like that, it might be time to change camps. Like, that's just ridiculous. Like, I can't see any merit in advice like that. So moving on from that, Scott Holtzman loses a very hard-fought decision to Nick Lentz. I love this fight for multiple reasons. Nick Lentz, he has maximized, I mean, much more so than what I said about Paul Felder. Paul Felder not necessarily being the most athletic guy in a lot of his contests, but having the fight IQ. Nick Lentz is even more so.
Because he's even less of an athlete. Like, he's even less talented. That's why.
Right. He's more of just like the everyman who's got really good at wrestling and jiu-jitsu, and he's there, you know, against these guys who are like really good athletes. Like Scott Holtzman is a beast of a man. Like he's a very, very big, strong guy for that weight class. And Nick Lentz was able to maximize his gifts while minimizing Scott Holtzman's. And it cost him a lot. Like, he looked battered, he looked destroyed, he looked bloody, but he won the fight in the smartest way possible. You know, his striking was just good enough to get Holtzman to respect it, to get Holtzman to doubt himself for moments. That switch kick he was landing, right on the money. He was landing a lot of good strikes repeatedly. And the moment that Holtzman kind of got settled into that striking rhythm, then he initiated the grappling exchanges. And they wouldn't come until, 2 minutes left in the round maybe. But every time they came, it was at the exact right moment, and he did exactly what he needed to do to keep the fight in his range at all times. And even an exhausted version of that Nick Lentz was able to do, like, I had Holtzman winning the last round, but I am not mad if you scored that last round for Nick Lentz. He arguably won that round completely exhausted against a superior athlete and was able to win that decision. I thought that was a masterful performance by Nick Lentz.
I love the hyperbole here about Nick Lentz, that you love this fight, that it was a fantastic performance. I mean, it was a Nick Lentz performance. I mean, we know what he is. I remember at the end of this fight, I didn't score it. I'll be honest. I didn't score any of these fights. I just sort of enjoyed it this evening. But I was thinking Holtzman landed by far the more damaging shots throughout the fight. Nick Lentz initiated grappling exchanges where he really didn't do much with it. But yet, he's probably going to win a 29-28 decision because he just tied him up for 2.5 minutes in the second round and the third round. And that just still looks very bad to most judges. I would love to see what Scott Holtzman would be like in a couple of years, because his boxing was crisp. His boxing, Nick Lentz, doesn't mean much. But I don't know. Like, again, very Nick Lentz-like performance. Don't want to take too much away from it. It was just very Nick Lentz-like, you know.
I thought this was like a little more varied than we normally see from Nick Lentz. Nick Lentz normally will just kind of grab you the whole time and just smother you that way and make you look bad and kind of take you out of your element. But he was able to hang in Holtzman's element for extended periods of time and have great success in moments. I think that shows some sort of evolution with Nick Lentz.
I would not use the word evolution and Nick Lentz in the same sentence at all. I'll put it this way. I think you're being a little bit overgenerous, to be honest, to Nick Lentz. I think, like you said, he knows how to capitalize on a fight. He knows how to game plan for it. He also knows he's a fantastic wrestler. His base is so strong when it comes to grappling that he can negate people's offensive skill, their talent, relatively easily at this level, especially, I mean, this level of the division. Holtzman just would get his back taken, would get grinded against the cage for very prolonged periods of time. Whenever they were separated, Holtzman was landing shots, in my opinion. Like, it, again, very Nick Lentz-like performance. I have no superlatives to give either one here other than Scott Holtzman, honestly. I thought his boxing was really on point. He just had nothing else to really answer to the grappling department of Nick Lentz, who is, I mean, probably, I mean, we don't talk about him being one of the better grapplers in the sport, but in terms of, like, efficiency, in terms of maximizing, again, athletic talent, skill set, technique, very few are like that. Like, you have the Damian Maias, of course, that are like light years better than Nick Lentz, but they're supremely their technique level is supreme. Nick Lentz doesn't have that, so he's able to make do with very little. So that's ultimately very impressive. But again, shout out to Nick Lentz for having a very Nick Lentz-like performance.
So haters gonna hate, but anyway,
I didn't know you were such a Nick Lentz fan. I'm sorry.
I'm really not a Nick Lentz fan, but I was very impressed by the way that fight played out. So,
I mean, what do you think is next for Nick Lentz? Like, what would you like another matchup for him? Like, well, if you were to play Sean Shelby here or McMaynard, you know, how do you match up Nick Lentz next?
I don't think you move him too far up the ladder with this one. Oh man, off the top of my head, I wasn't prepared for that one. I think maybe
this was a lightweight. This was a lightweight.
Lightweight, yeah. So maybe Alex Hernandez. I think that might be a good matchup right there. I wouldn't mind seeing that fight.
No, I like that one. No, I'll be down for that one. Maybe a rematch with Charles Oliveira.
Yeah,
would be okay with that one as well.
I'm not mad at that. Although I think Oliveira might deserve a bigger boost than a Nick Lentz at this point, just because. Man, Oliveira just every time he steps in the cage, something spectacular happens, whether it be good or bad. And maybe it'd be nice to have a bigger name attached to those spectacular events.
And a couple other names, Gilbert Burns, Trinaldo. Like, those are some names I wouldn't mind for Nick Lentz next. Nothing more than that, in my opinion.
Yeah, that sounds about a good path for Lentz. All right, so we got to touch on this before we call it a night. Henning Burrell loses really savage knockout loss to Luke Sanders. Surprisingly, Burrell started off looking really good, and it all fell apart. And
sort of looked good.
He looked good to me. Like, I think he went back to that well too many times with that body kick. You know, and he didn't even try to kick with the other leg. He didn't really vary up enough to keep the opportunities open for that main weapon, and that's what ended up costing him. But I mean, that first round was the best we had seen Henning Burrell look for a very long time.
It is also Luke Sanders, so let's always keep that in mind. You know, it is probably his easiest fight in his losing streak thus far, in my opinion. Like, this was an opponent that he should have beat if he was still 70% there. It's just so weird with Henning Burrell. Like, another one of those what ifs, like a Cain Velasquez, but I mean, far worse because he hasn't really been injury prone. He's been fighting. Like, it was just TJ Dillashaw ruined him in the most obvious way. Like, I've never seen a drop off talent wise to this degree. I think in all of combat sports, like in my time of covering it, I can't think of anyone. Like, I literally cannot think of anyone that's dropped off this fast after being pound for pound top 5 at the time. He went from pound for pound top 5 to being a irrelevant, faded fighter, still in his 20s. Like, that's weird. I don't know what to make of that. It's just also sad. Like, Henning Burrell was on top of the world at one point. Like, you can transport us as a community post the Eddie Wineland spinning back kick knockout. We all thought Henning Burrell was going to be the future. We all thought he was going to beat Dominic Cruz when Dominic Cruz came back, or if he ever came back at that point. Dillashaw came in. We're like, oh, Dillashaw, he's gonna get finished. You know, we've seen him get finished before, not that big a deal. And then all of a sudden, 2 fights later, how the story has changed. And I think it was Bloody Elbow that put out, and a lot of people have echoed it. I echoed it. You echoed it. Like, just the bantamweight division's history of champions and how, like, that is a curse. Like, Miguel Torres, another guy that had a precipitous drop-off talent-wise.
After, a 20-fight win streak, something insane like that.
Something insane.
Brian Balls.
I mean, being a meth dealer? Like,
yeah, and a domestic abuser. He what a tremendous fall from grace for him to pass that torch to Dominic Cruz with his injury woes, to pass that torch on to Henning Burrell, who we see now, to pass that torch on to TJ Dillashaw, who just woke up from the Cejudo fight, to pass that torch on to Cody Garbrandt, who just woke up from the 2 Dillashaw fights, to pass that torch on to. It's like this. This is the new Superman curse.
Yeah,
like you know, and of course with TJ Dillashaw and Cody Garbrandt, you know, that is kind of an exaggeration. I mean, these guys have a lot of career left in them, and they're still very much so top shelf MMA talent. Dominic Cruz also could come back and reclaim glory too. But we see these guys who had this belt, and now I'm not too informed on what Chase Beebe and Eddie Wineland have been up to nowadays, and they held the WEC bantamweight belt. But since the Zuffa era, if you've held that bantamweight title belt, bad things started happening to you. So I mean, we're looking at Henning Burrell like Christopher Reeves at this point.
Oh, damn. R.I.P. I'll say this. I'm trying to look up really fast to sort of remember it, but I don't think bantamweight has ever had a long-standing champion. Like the closest is probably Miguel Torres, but I'd probably need to look it up.
Cruz was there for a while.
He was. It was just a matter of like if he hadn't been injured, like I think he would be the long-standing champion we talk about, right?
Well, right. Even before his injury woes, he did have the belt for a little bit.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't think we had anything close to Jose Aldo, George St. Pierre, Anderson Silva,
Demetrius Johnson or something like that. Yeah,
John Jones. Like you look at some of these long-standing champions that have really reigned in a division, given it a history, a legacy that's never existed at bantamweight. Even at like 155, like we never had a long-standing champion really. That's always been just a passing, I should say, like musical chairs. That division has been. Bantamweight's sort of like that. I don't know if that hurts it long term, that there's never been a real name that fans can attach themselves with that division, like a George St. Pierre, like Anderson Silva, like a John Jones or Chuck Liddell or Tito Ortiz. I wonder if that hurts it at the end of the day. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe I'm overblowing this aspect to it or this sort of angle to it, but that is something to me that, hey, we've never had a reigning champion at this division at any point in its history, in my opinion. That's weird. Like that usually doesn't exist in most cases.
Yeah, so definitely a time for Henning Burrell to reconsider his future as a bantamweight or his future as a fighter. Period. Like if you were, I did read some tweets saying that Henning Burrell is supposed to be officially moving up to featherweight. If that's the case, I hope he does it outside the UFC. Henning Burrell is not a top shelf mixed martial artist at this point anymore, and it's unfortunate to see somebody who at one point had a legitimate claim to pound for pound supremacy now essentially reduced to rubbles of what his career was. So if you are a loved one of Henning Burrell, it's time to sit him down and have a very difficult conversation. I don't really think there's any way around that conversation at this point.
And also,
let's hope that happens.
Another aspect to it, like obviously the Dillashaw losses were via TKO and were very like Cain JDS like in terms of punishment, but the Aljamain Sterling loss, the Brian Keller loss, the Andre Uro loss, like those were 3 rounds. Those were very long fights of him just not looking good, him getting pieced up. And his only wins in the last 5 years are Philip Nover and Mitch Gagnon. Like there is, like he is not top 20. He's not top 30. Like he should retire. Like I think we're now to the point where the durability of Henning Burrell to be able to take these long sustained punishment, these long fights of just being beat up. This is the fight to indicate, okay, that's over. Like the chin is gone. The decision losses are dried up. I'm deeply concerned about Henning Burrell's health going forward. I don't think he has like an Arlovsky renaissance in any way. Like that just doesn't happen in my mind. Henning Burrell, please retire. You had a good career. It's time to hang it up. Just honestly.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with that at all. All right, so before we wrap this up, Matt, any particular things from the UFC's first foray on ESPN?
I mean, it just doesn't feel like it for some reason. Like I think the ESPN Plus event with Dillashaw, Cejudo, and plus obviously the prelims have been on ESPN, main ESPN, for the UFC 233 card. No, not 233, 234, because there is no 233. So for some reason it doesn't have the same like feeling in my mind, same vibe that the Fox debut had, because that was the first event on Fox. Like there wasn't any preliminary events that had their prelims on Fox. That was the first Fox event, was that card. It felt like a moment. This one didn't have that anyway, if that makes sense. Like there was no big hoopla in any way. Like this just felt like another event. I wonder if that's going to hurt it in viewership. Like I think maybe some are expecting like, oh, it's the first main card, it's going to have insane viewership. It might just be like 2 million. Like it might just be a really good number, but not, otherworldly. Because again, this is just another fight card. In the era of saturation or oversaturation, this is sort of that effect. It's now, in my opinion, more like the third or fourth event on ESPN. Not really the first. And that's weird. And also, I mean, just to sort of, again, final thoughts on the card itself, the main event, like Cain, it's just sad. Another sort of example of what if. I think we will have a discussion later on about what his legacy is, because I don't think he is the best heavyweight of all time. Like, I don't think you can really safely make that argument. Even before this fight, like, I don't know if that argument ever really existed. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm probably gonna get a lot of hate for it, even amongst my colleagues in the media. But I think there's an argument there. And also, Francis Ngannou, it's always great to have a prospect that struggled bounce back. There's always something about that. So great. It's Aljamain Sterling, another prospect that struggled, bounced back. Great to see. Fun fight card overall. I'm glad to see the next one. Anthony, obviously, thank you for having me on. You can find me at Matt Hunter, MCR, all platforms. Obviously, I have my own show, Mixed Combat Radio, as well, MCR Net on YouTube. And Anthony's on that from time to time as a guest co-host. And plus, obviously, you can find some of my content at sharedar.com since I've done some video work and some photography work for them. Yeah,
so definitely want to echo some of your sentiments there about the ESPN debut. The ESPN Plus debut felt grander to me. Yes. Of course, you put a title fight in that picture, and it boosts things the way the first Fox event did. But yeah, I mean, overall, a fun event that Phoenix just doesn't deserve. Like you don't deserve this, Phoenix. I'm sorry. Actually, I'm not sorry. Phoenix, the crowd in Talking Stick Arena, you really sucked. So yeah, we'll just leave it at that. Shout out to Sean Al-Shadi and Jose Youngs. They're my homies. They're from Phoenix. No disrespect to y'all. But y'all know your crowd sucked.
Yo, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, guys. Yeah. Like LA is like 3 hours, 4 hours away. Actually, probably more than that. But you guys just make the move.
Yeah. So if I get a whole bunch of people from Phoenix making that little drive up here to catch these hands, you know where to find me. All right. So I guess that'll do it, man. So definitely let's thank Matt Hunter, host of Mixed Combat Radio, once again for jumping up on the Walkout Network as officially the first guest.
Oh my God, that
has ever been on this channel. So,
take that, Jason.
Yeah, you hear that, Burgos? It's on you now, brother. All right, so for Matt Hunter, find him, obviously, Mixed Combat Radio. He shouted out all of his Twitter info. I'll link that in the description as well. Of course, I'm Anthony Walker of SureDog.com and MMA On Point. So what's going on next? The Good, Bad, and the Ugly, my normal post-fight column, should be live tomorrow. I'm going to start writing that as soon as I shut down this for the evening. I just had my third video for MMA On Point drop today as well, about 10 fighters who got the last laugh. I think I forget what the second one's about, but that's out too.
Yo,
so I got
Mr. Big Time all of a sudden, man. Get on MMA On Point, man, and they've been going hard in the last 12 months, maybe 6 months, maybe 9 months.
Yeah, man, they've been doing it. So I'm definitely happy to be a part of that team now. One of their latest additions there. So obviously, you can also find me on the SureDog.com YouTube channel for The Trenches, the live chat, co-hosted by myself and Jason Burgos. So look forward to that, and Ask Ant, the weekly mailbag column, shortly thereafter. So send me your questions on Twitter at Ant Walker MMA. That's also my Instagram name. And if you like the video, like and subscribe. Please share it with your friends. Go ahead, make it the talk of the town, make it the talk of the water cooler, make it the talk of Phoenix, please. But yeah, for Matt Hunter, I'm Anthony Walker, and you know what you got to do, everybody. You got to stay beautiful. You got to stay positive. You got to stay incredible. You got to stay smarter than all these mofos out here in these streets. And most of all, you got to stay sexy. I'll see you when I see you. Peace.
Peace.